Okay, we've got our water finished now. It's got that nice transparency on it, that nice blue color. So what we're going to go ahead and do next is create our islands. And to do that, what we need to do is create what's called a terrain. And a terrain is basically a 3D piece of geometry that we can like ply and pull and manipulate to look like hills and slopes inside the Unity editor. So to do that, what we need to do is go over to our hierarchy pane here, right click, click 3D object and terrain down from the drop down menu. And you'll notice that it's going to kind of offset it from our water a bit. And that's because our water is centered on the world, but terrains by default put a corner at that 0, 0, 0 point. So to fix that, all we have to do is click on our terrain, go to our transform component, and for our X and Z position coordinates, we're going to add a -500 and a -500. And that's going to center our guy right there on our water so our edges line up perfectly with our other edges. Next up, what we want to do is click on our terrain object and look at the terrain component. And you'll start out on this hill option. What we're going to do is click on the gear icon on the farthest right option here. And you're going to look down in this basic terrain section, and you'll see the bottom option says material here. And it's going to say default terrain standard. That default terrain standard is that checkered pattern that you might be able to make out if I get a little closer. That checkered pattern, and that's not, that doesn't look like sand. We want sand for our islands. So what we can do is go into our Techability folder, click on the Environments folder, and go to Other. And you can ignore this stuff for now. What we want is this sand material. So we're going to click back on our terrain here, and we're going to drag this sand material into this material field here. It's going to give us an error, but that's one that we can ignore. Generally speaking, when you have these yellow errors, it's more so a warning saying that, hey, if you do some things, it might mess something up, it might not. And in our case, this one is one we can ignore. It's not going to mess with anything in our islands. Next, what we want to do is click on our Paint Terrain button here, and it should start on the raise or lower terrain, but if it doesn't, you can click this drop down, and we're going to select raise or lower terrain. And what that's going to be is a tool that allows us to essentially pull the material that the terrain is made out of up and create islands. And you'll notice if you just start going willy-nilly, I don't remember if it starts on this brush, but you're going to want to select this built-in brush here, this built-in brush 2. It should look like this kind of fuzzy orb type look. And we're going to want to set our brush size to 120 and our opacity to 10. This is important because this stuff controls how strong our tool is when we start trying to make our islands. So you'll notice when you click, it starts to move, and that's exactly what we want. As you move your mouse, the terrain will kind of grow. And the amount that it grows is dependent on these values. So watch, if I crank opacity up from 10 to, let's say, 50, suddenly I'm getting huge islands, and that's not what we want. So 10 is a good value for that. And the brush size is just the actual size of our little brush stroke here. So if we crank that up to like, let's say around 1,000, that's a little big. We can make a humongous island if we wanted, but that's probably not ideal. So we're going to drop that back down to 120. I found that this is a pretty good value to work with. And then you're just going to go around and create some islands. So I'm going to do that now. And again, you do that by clicking and dragging your mouse. You can actually just click slightly. You can move your mouse and click to get like, these kind of double island effects. And you can even experiment with these other brushes if you want. You can get some rougher looking islands and stuff. Maybe even a star-shaped island if you're interested in that kind of thing. So feel free to experiment with these options here, but we're going to want to make a few islands, and we're going to want to make sure that most of these islands, or at least a good number of them, aren't too pointed. We want to make sure we have enough flat islands for us to put enemies and treasure and stuff on. So take your time. This is a chance for you guys to really make the game unique and make it into your own thing. So take your time, make a cool layout, and and just really go crazy with this. Really make something that's unique to you. Just the key to make sure is that you make some flat islands with some space for buildings or enemies on it, and enough space for the boats to travel through. Because remember, we are going to have a big old boat that we need to be able to fit between these islands. So yeah, take some time. I'm going to go ahead and make my islands now real quick, and I'm going to fast forward through that so you can get a sense for the process. And then we'll move on to the next step. One thing to note while you're doing these islands is that left clicking will raise the terrain, but you might notice that some of these islands are a little too tall. So what you can actually do is hold shift and left click, and it will actually kind of round out the top of the mountain. So that's pretty useful if you make an island too tall by accident. You can hold shift and click, and it will it'll kind of pull down on the islands here. So my islands I think they're looking pretty good here. I kind of like the texture, and I think we've got a pretty cool layout. So I think that's it for me. Again, yours isn't going to look exactly like mine, but that's what we want. We want to encourage everybody to kind of make their own, put your own little signature on it. So once you get your islands to look like you like it, like something that you're happy with, you can go ahead and save. And in the next step, we're going to dress them up and make them look like this is a nice lived-in corner of the ocean.